Pociąg ekspres Intercity Premium do stacji Gdynia Główna przez stację Warszawa Zachodnia, Warszawa Centralna, Warszawa Wschodnia, Ława Główna, Czew, stoi na torze 4 przy peronie 4. Wagony o numerach 7, 6, 5 znajdują się na początku składu pociągu. Wagony o numerach 4, 3 znajdują się w środku składu pociągu. Wagony o numerach 2, 1 znajdują się na końcu składu pociągu. Pociąg objęty jest obowiązkową rezerwacją miejsc. Planowy odjazd pociągu o godzinie 9:46.
Hi everyone, Chancellor here. Welcome to the 9th episode of SimRail Podcast. In this edition, the main topic is my favorite suggestions players made for the game. I have compiled a list of suggestions, mostly from the official Discord channel, but also from other sources and conversations, including our forum. But before that, I will update you on the recent news in SimRail, and I will finish with the Polish pronunciation section. Let's dive in. Since the last episode, there were no game updates, so we are still running the update from the 29th of September. Also, since the last episode, Eridor indeed showed us Baby Station and Piotrków Trybunalski from the upcoming route, so it seems it will indeed finish there, as some have already predicted. Surprisingly, Piotr Szot, also known as Szociu, reappeared on Discord, firstly showing the sneak peek of Skoda 163 locomotive, and then having a little chat with us in the Polish and English servers, so that's always nice to see. He showed us other updates, which was then compiled in his sneak peek the week after. The updates he showcased are: vegetation will have a new lighting model and improved colors. Some vehicles will get tinted windows, like ED250, the Elf, Trucks, Dragon 2. All vehicles will get reflections in windows. It wasn't mentioned in the sneak peeks, but it looks like there will be also shine of decals on the body of the cars as well. New motion blur with radial blurring will be added so that the center remains sharp and the rest blurs the stronger the closer to the edge of the screen. Supposedly this should improve the effect of movement. It wasn't mentioned in the in this particular sneak peek, but new lighting hue or aura or halo shown on semaphores, street lights and locomotive lights will also be added. Part of Królik's chassis update, we will get improved movement of cars and locomotives. Królik also mentioned a different camera movement inside the cabin of locomotives. I believe this relates to the shaking of the cabin, and I think there will also be a button or a slider to increase or decrease the effect so that we don't get movement sickness as some people suffer from it. 3 weeks after, Szociu showed another sneak peek with even more updates. This included modified shader for grass and randomization of plants, which looks pretty cool, and the environment seems to be getting a new life and be less bland than we currently have. Królik Uszasty mentioned the development of an in-game switch to control the amount of rendered steam and smoke in steam locomotives. This is to improve performance and prepare for its launch in multiplayer. I have seen mentioned options for this setting to be all, off, or only me. but perhaps there will be more tweaks available. When I asked Krulik whether we will have another TY2 event, he said it is planned, but not sooner than this patch, or the patch with this Steam control will be released. Another big news, which appeared on Discord, is the announcements of professional servers. So far, the moderators, mainly Pankura, Mr. Hen, confirmed that they are planned. So we have no release date. Nothing is set in stone as well, but the confirmation that they are planned was made by him. Professional servers is something that has been requested since forever in SimRail. Railway purists and people who like to drive or signal in the conditions the closest to the real-life conditions in Poland always wanted to play on such servers, so I hope this is good news for them. I did ask Pankura some questions concerning the pro servers, so allow me to quote what his answers were. My first question was, are any additional restrictions planned for players different from what we currently have on those professional servers? I wanted to know if there will be any specific entry requirements to play on such servers. Pankura answered, yes, they are planned. The key difference between a regular server and a pro server is the required knowledge of railway regulation used on the PKP PLK network. This does not mean that every player must memorize every possible instruction found in the PLK website. But the rules will specify which instructions are mandatory. At the moment, there are 6 of them. He does not mention which are those. By the way, this is my translation. He answered in Polish, which you can see on the screen. My follow-up question to this one was, will everyone have access to the pro server? Yes, everyone will have access. However, if a player violates the pro server regulations or the EULA, their access may be suspended for a certain time or permanently. Do the plans for the pro server include the year 2025? It's difficult to answer this question right now. At the moment, the priority is the second part of the Łódź DLC. Once work on that is completed, it may be possible to add the necessary features to launch a simplified version of the Pro server. And my last question was, is the Pro server part of the future multiplayer improvements that Krulik Uszasty mentioned in the podcast? I haven't had the chance to fully listen to your podcast with Krulik, so I am not entirely sure what was said. However, after the Pro server has been running permanently for some time, the plan is to implement features such as passenger train services that start or end within the map, or automatic random failures, or railway traffic control equipment. So there is that. This is what I could gather from the discussion about the Pro servers. So as we could hear, there will be first simplified version, probably for testing, and then after our feedback, we will get the final version. We'll see how it goes. Another big and rather surprising news was about Metro Sim. As some of you know, this game was announced way back then, and then we stopped hearing about it. Me and I guess a lot of people thought this project has been abandoned, but recently financial reports, which I believe was digged by the user Assertu, who apparently is not a woman, surprisingly, digged this financial report up, and we could find some interesting information about the game. First off, the planned release is for March 2026. In the second report, we could see the information that it will be released as a DLC to SimRail. I am very curious how it will go. First off, because there is not a lot time left to March. And second thing is this seems to be changing the mechanics of SimRail quite a bit. So I am very curious about the implementation of it in our game. It makes sense that we will have just a separate third gameplay style in the main menu. Like we have now, we have two for driving and for signaling. So maybe there will be third option for metro in Warszawa. By the way, Warszawa is the only city currently in Poland which has metro. In the city we have two lines of metro, not really complicated ones. Before we had just a vertical line as a map of our metro, Polish metro. And now, after adding the second line, we have a cross as a map of our subway, or rather metro. The biggest question is whether or not the team will manage to release it in March. Even though I wasn't previously interested in a simulator of metro, this always is nice to see a new variation added to the game, hopefully bringing more players. Next up, we have the appearance of SimRail in PlayStation Store. And there was also mention that Xbox release is planned for the second half of 2026. There is also a big new movement towards developing input-output system for SimRail. We have a new dedicated Discord channel in which some of the devs are quite active and there is a lot of conversation going on. Some progress of development is also being featured there. So everyone who always wanted to have some additional controls or screens should be really happy and check the channel. SimCall showed the equipment for the professional simulators for GSMR communication. Pankura mentioned that this system will appear in SimRail because SimCall already has made the equipment and software for it, but there is always the question of when. No official news about it. The system will also be implemented in Poland. As mentioned before, the main topic of this episode are suggestions. The developers got aggravated by the spam in the suggestion channels, mostly in the Polish one, because it's flooded with constantly requesting the same things and arguing about some nonsense stuff and basically spamming it. My suggestions are mostly collected from the English channel on Discord, loose conversations, and the forum. The Polish channels, I can't read it and filter all the spam away, so mostly I am trying to avoid it. Again, this list is my personal preference, the suggestions I like the most from the ones I could see and filter out. So take it with a grain of salt. I skip the obvious suggestions for the route extensions, locomotives and cars. I mainly focus on the low-hanging fruits, which I think could be made in a less amount of time than those humongous endeavors like routes. My first suggestion is dark mode paper timetables. I know those don't exist in real life. However, in the game, when driving in the night, For people who don't play with UI and check the paper timetable often, you know what I mean. When you drive in the outskirts of Harznica, the whole screen is dark, perhaps your room is also dark, and then you click the paper timetable and meet the wall of bright light screaming at you from the screen. This is the main reason I would really like to see the dark paper timetables, which shouldn't be very hard to make. You can use any software. Nowadays, most of the PDF readers can reverse the colors and you get the dark mode paper timetable. My second suggestion I really like is the fade in, fade out chat option. This would remove the need to pressing F5 every time you hear a message has been posted. And ideally, it would be great if we could configure the fade in chat, for example, to be appearing every time there is a new message, or only when a player input has been detected. So, for example, it wouldn't appear when we get the message that we can depart from PH stop. Another cool feature would be, I think, showing switch speeds temporarily after pressing a key in stations. As you know, Moritz collected in our SimRail Wikipedia the switch speeds for every station we have available. I would really like to see the switch speeds appear. For example, when you see the scheme on a computer screen, let's say when you press Control, they will appear. When you release it, they will disappear. I'm guessing it may be problematic for the domino panels. On the other hand, for the domino panels, we have the top-down view. I don't remember which camera it was, but there is a set view where you watch from the top to the bottom. Because it's a set view, you could locate the switch speeds in some distinguishable format or font so that it is visible at the background of the domino panel, but at least for the computer screens it should be easy. I know this is not what we have in real life, but I still think it would be helpful in this game, because it is a game, let's not forget about it, especially for the newcomers or newcomers to the specific station. I myself need to check switch speeds from time to time when I visit a station I haven't played on for a long time. So there is that. Concerning substitute signals, every time you receive such a signal, you should get a reason why such a signal was provided to you. It would be fantastic that the bots, first off, that they inform you they gave you substitute signal, and even more cool would be a system of a pool of reason for bots to say in the chat. So, for example, train number X, Y, and Z, you are given a substitute signal due to equipment malfunction. Something like that. People smarter than me probably could think of plethora of other reasons they could say. And because we have a random chance for the bots to give us such a signal, they would also randomly pick such a reason from such a pool and post it in the chat. If not, then at least an information about substitute signal from the bots to us in the chat would be great, since you get sometimes the information about the pass-through given by the bot already in the game. For signalers, keyboard shortcut for dialog options. So something like keyboard shortcuts to open the dialog to each neighbor, and then shortcuts for each dialog options, so that when you get the muscle memory going for those shortcuts, you could piano play 3 buttons, let's say 1, 3, and 5, to inform the second neighbor about train departure. So the specific dialogue option would appear just by pressing those. As we have mentioned in the past in the podcast, drivers who are standing on red at the entry to a station are obliged to ask the signalers about the reason why don't they have the entry. I think it would be cool if both drivers would poke a player signaler when they are standing on red at entry. So, for example, there would be the name of the station, Dąbrowa Górnicza, train X, Y, and Z, standing at the entry signal. Or, if the chat options would be too much, one player suggested that at least the sound of ZEV3 input would be pretty cool. So again, this is the obligatory communication for drivers in such situations. So both following such rules would be fantastic in the game. Next up is getting experience points for properly handling neutral sections and dimming lights. I don't think punishing with negative points if we don't do it would be a good idea, maybe for the professional servers mentioned before, but some small amount of points would encourage us, the players, the drivers, to properly handle those. Next up is warning or countdown of planned server restarts. When we are in the game, the veteran players, they already know when the restarts are, but not everyone, or sometimes you can forget what time is it. Because the game is so great, the time flies fast. So if we would have some announcements, let's say a warning 5 minutes before a server restart, it would be great. Of course, there are also unplanned server restarts, so it might be hard to implement this. But for the planned ones, I think it would be great. I have found a whole thread for queues for stations and trains. So for example, if you want to signal at a specific station on a specific server and it's taken, you would click on the station and you would be first in the queue. And this is controversial one, because many players did not like the idea, but someone posted a system of tokens which we would get. For example, you would get tokens for working on a less popular stations. Let's say 1 hour in Juliusz or Dorota, you would get 1 token. And you could spend those tokens to get higher priority in the queue for the most popular stations. You wouldn't be kicking, of course, the signaler on that station, but you would be higher in the queue for this particular one. I really like this idea, not because it would make it easier to get to the stations, most occupied ones, but it would also be the encouragement for signaling in the less popular stations. Mati556677 suggested a movable chat windows for signalers. The other user, Xenox Oliver, he mentioned even more a scalable and movable all UI elements. So just more customization for the UI windows, both for signaling and for driving. More options is always good in my opinion. So I am up for that. A small but annoying thing. Personally, I always play in the dark mode for EDR, and the game never remembers it. So every time I enter a station, the first thing I do, I go to EDR and I switch to dark mode. It would be great if the game remembered my last setting. Just saying. A system for favorite trains. We have a system for the favorite servers. So maybe it would be also nice to have a favorite system for specific trains. So this could be either locomotive type, or the specific train type, like 611XX, for example. The same goes for the favorite stations, even more for this. I'm not sure how it would be how it should be implemented for the favorite trains, but for the stations it should be relatively easy. So we have your favorite available stations on top. An option to teleport to platforms for signalers. Well, some people may frown upon hearing about the teleportation for signalers. It's so bad for the simulation, right? Well, we already have teleportation for signalers. When you press 1, you go back to your station. So perhaps another button could be to teleport to the platforms, which is probably the most visited place outside of your signal box. Concerning signalers, the first thing, the ancient request already, is the experience system for signalers. Currently, we don't have the experience. Well, we only have experience for driving and nothing for signalers. So a system for them would be great to see. If not experience system for signalers, then perhaps displaying dispatching hours on a profile of players would be something to consider, so that we know whether, for example, an odd behavior of someone is just the lack experience or perhaps it's trolling. Going even further, maybe a little bit controversial, but one could also track and show in the player profile the number of given substitute signals. Another thing is a small one, but it's pretty annoying. It's about the focus after typing in the chat, especially while driving. So I think it would be really great to have the focus go back away from the chat after pressing enter and sending your message. Because sometimes you want to press a button like brakes and you are still in the chat. So you are typing instead of braking, which can be in-game dangerous sometimes. I think things like braking are more burning and pressing matters than sending another message more quickly. If not automatic focus switching, then perhaps we could get some kind of Shift-Tab keyboard shortcut to switch between the foci from and to the chat. Here's another controversial one. Back in the days, I suggested in the forums the option to temporarily turn on bot for signalers. This would be to fix problems or when going AFK. This is especially helpful for new players which have problems with switching blockades and things like that. By initiating a bot, they could see what the bot has done and how to fix it. The main antagonistic answers I got for this suggestion was that if you are going AFK, you shouldn't have the option to turn on bot, because you should just quit the station and let other players play. Okay, I understand that, but perhaps we could have such an option for a very limited time, or maybe just to fix the blockades and situations like that for newer players. Moreover, sometimes there is some glitch in signaler stations. I find myself relatively often needing to reload to a station. Perhaps you could avoid reloading by temporarily switching a bot signaler to fix itself. Timo Hrabasht suggested a cool thing: separate graphic settings for drivers and signalers. This would be especially useful for the players with less powerful systems. One can imagine that signalers don't need, for example, as lush vegetation and other effects as drivers. So this would be a cool thing, especially if it would automatically switch to a specific setting when we enter specific mode. Next up is checkpoints for experience reward points just before finishing the available routes. For example, when we drive towards Puszcza Mariańska, Myszków, Rokiciny or Bełchów. This would just be a small reward for players staying until the very end of the scenario. A suggestion: when exiting to the menu from the game, from already driving or signaling, so that we go back to the same server without disconnecting. I believe most players play on the same server, so when exiting a specific train, a specific signal station, they would go back to the selection screen on the same server. And if someone would like to change the server, they can just press escape and go back to the list of the server. Someone suggested a slider for the street traffic sound effects. I know that on especially some stations, the traffic sound can be really annoying. I sometimes thought there is someone dying outside of the signal box or something, and it was just a slow car passing by. And when they pass by quite often in the night when there are no other sounds, it can be distracting. And again, more options is always good in my view. For stations with multiple EDR screens, like Skierniewice, I think the button to open EDR should always bring you to the main substation and not the next one as it is currently in the game. Just to have consistent starting point. You could train your muscle memory so that if you want to go to the second card of EDR, second substation, you know that you need to press the EDR button twice. Currently it's inconsistent because it remembers the last screen you were on. So when you press it, you will go back to where you were before. Next up is bots informing us if we made a mistake in train number when answering or announcing a train to the bot signaler. The bots do check the numbers we give them, because if they ask, for example, for a specific track for specific train and we make a mistake, they will ask again as we did not answer at all. So perhaps a poke that such a train does not exist or it's not currently in the vicinity. There is this danger that we could, for example, give a real train number, but the number we gave would be for a train which will come in 2 hours. So this, I don't know how to fix it. Maybe by vicinity. On the other hand, you could ask for a route for train which is already far away. I don't know how to fix it so that we don't have those conflicts. But some poke, some feedback from the bot dispatchers would be nice. Someone suggested to utilize the notification assist on signal boxes to inform a player about the need to close a crossing when they are trying to set a route without closing it. It would be also great when this notification assist would mention that the crossing is controlled from the CCTV screen, as those, I believe, are the most tricky parts for the newer players. Now let's switch to the suggestions, which are harder to implement and perhaps are not so low-hanging fruits as the other were. First up is adding dialogue templates for drivers, similar to the ones we have for dispatchers. The biggest advantage, I think, that the selectable dialogue would also be translated to the supported languages to help with communications, like it is currently now for signalers. I believe someone mentioned that the devs are supposedly working on such a feature in the view of the imminent console release. So I'm really looking forward to seeing that. A DLC idea by the user Lucas BR218. Additional car options and variations as a DLC. We know that we have some licensing problems for specific liveries, but perhaps there exist liveries which only require additional work. So selling that as a DLC, I know it's controversial, right? Paying for something in the game. But this is completely optional thing. So if releasing those things as a paid DLC to justify working on them, I think it's pretty great idea. If we cannot have more liveries, then perhaps more variations in the existing ones would be an idea. For example, like we have Clean and Dirty EU07, the blue livery. Maybe some variations like that. Different wear and dirt state of the paint. The user Gas suggested different wear on controls and knobs, and even perhaps some light bulbs not working in the cabins. That's also a pretty great idea. An option to mark trains in EDR that do not exist in the current game. What I mean by that is the trains that are of course planned but did not spawn correctly or were deleted because of derailment, for example. We already have the leftmost columns with K and NK already in EDR, which stands for, I believe, kursuje and nie kursuje, which means the train is running or the train is not running. There is the danger that someone marks not running by accident, or the train did not run but now it did spawn, so others could simply just check back to running, including bots. The elf cockpit lightning. So currently the lighting in the cockpit is too intense. I believe the reflection from the paper is too strong. I already did suggested that, and the funny thing is that Kruli Kushasti, when he saw it, he posted a picture of temporary fix like within a few hours from that. So he did manage to fix it, but I guess perhaps it wasn't implemented yet. Maybe we will see it in the big upcoming patch, or maybe it wasn't tested still. So just as a reminder, it would be great to have a working and not blinding cabin or specifically cockpit lighting in the elf. But signalers respecting the schedule of freight trains. I believe this is the most controversial one from my suggestions. I still think, and I am the proponent of respecting the schedule of freight trains, and I also realize that there are many people against it, which are the proponents of the if there is a way, you can send a train whenever. Either way, I would like to see bots respecting that. In some places they do. I believe Zastuf is the one for the 1320 freight train, and it seems people do not like it much. I do, but something to consider. On the other hand, I think the the servers has not been tested with such settings, so perhaps it would be too much of fiddling with timetable and those settings. But still, something I personally would like to see. A suggestion to add some sort of reward for participating in the next beta version, or especially during stress tests. We had a few of those in the past. Some small thing, maybe some kind of achievement, or I guess only the achievement. We don't have any profile modifications except for the level, I guess. So some sort of reward to encourage players to testing. Since we know how much time it takes to create a new route, I suggested in the past to refresh existing routes, perhaps an option to shuffle temporary speed limits on the old routes would bring a fresh breath to them. The main disadvantage is that perhaps they would not be, most likely, they would not be representing in real life places of those. On the other hand, I think having to learn new places with temporary speed limits would still bring a fresh new breath, as I said. This is something I personally would, again, like to see. Finally, a switch in the options to turn off brightness adaptation. And this may be a tricky thing, because I assume this is the engine behavior. What I mean by that is the game has brightness adaptation like in cameras. You can see it well on a sunny day if you look at the window and then on the floor or when leaving a tunnel in the tunnel station. While cool at times, for example, the tunnel thing is realistic, of course. It is not always great. As you can see in the screen when driving here at Pentolino at daylight, the colors are washed out in the standard view. But if you move the camera up so that mostly the screen is covered by the window, you see a nice vibrant colors. This is most likely due to the cockpit being dark. So everything outside is overly bright and influences the colors. Personally, I don't like that. So an option to switch it off would be fantastic, but again, it may be the engine thing and would possibly require a lot of work. I would like to finish this part with the first ever suggestions I have found. In the forum, the first suggestions were on the 14th of January 2023. In the Polish channel, a user called Arcadio SF. He suggested so that we have a check mark, don't show anymore, for the early access warning screen in the game. In the past, we had this screen appearing every time we launched the game, and he wanted to get rid of it, which I absolutely agree. The other very early suggestions from the same day, or at least on the same page, were from a user Foots. He suggested to sort drivers and signalers for the ones in front of us and the ones behind us. This is just for the driver. So a separation line, I guess. That sounds pretty cool, but since more than 2 years ago, almost 3 years ago, it hasn't been either considered or implemented. I have also seen a familiar face, Kierownik, in those early days suggestions. He was suggesting the monitors on stations should remove the information about a train when it departs. Apparently the information stayed until presumably the next train arrived. For the English channel, on the same day, the 14th of January, a user called Knalltüte, I guess a German user suggested to show delay on the map. So I believe it is a suggestion for the API to show the current delay of the trains. That's also pretty cool. For the Discord suggestions, we have the first one 1 month later on the 6th of February 2023. In the Polish channel, a user Matiko pointed out that we get negative points for not stopping at a station while driving a freight train. As you remember, back in the good times, the suggestion channel in Discord was for bugs and suggestions. Currently is only for suggestions. On the same day, not the first one, but very early, a user Xevoni appears as well, which sounds familiar. However, it looks like he was on a different account. For the English channel for suggestions, a user Marty was the first one to say that the AI bot at Psary and Góra Włodowska sent 2 trains on the same track headed towards each other. So the problems of the early bot signalers. These are all suggestions, the low-hanging fruits and not so low-hanging fruits, which I liked, which I could track. I apologize for not pointing out every user that has suggested specific suggestion, because often similar suggestions appeared in different places, so it was quite hard to track which one was first, and sometimes these were just threads of other suggestions, and it's the one obvious ones I did say, but apologies for the original authors if I did not mention them. Let's move to the Polish pronunciation section. The first station I would like to talk about is Zgierz. This is the station, the most northern station in the Łódź part. Recently, SimCall showed some pictures from the professional simulators, and some players noted that this part is actually extended further to the north towards or up to even a city called Kutno. Eridor showed us that in SimRail we will only have Zgierz towards this direction, but there is this discrepancy between the professional simulator and SimRail. So perhaps either we will have a nice surprise, I don't think so, or this is the direction we could have relatively soon in SimRail, since it's already done in SimCall. But as we all know, SimCall professional simulators are not always or rarely completely translated into SimRail. So here's hoping, but we'll see how it goes. Let's go to the west, and the most western city we will get in the DLC part 2 is called Sieradz. So Zgierz and Sieradz I think could be problematic for the foreigners, so this is how we pronounce them. A bit further east from Sieradz is a city called Zduńska Wola. And here is an interesting part. Zduńska is an adjective word which comes from the Polish word zdun. Zdun means a craftsman who built and repaired traditional tile stoves and chimneys. So I guess the name originally referred to a settlement associated with such stove makers. Wola, on the other hand, is a historical term used for villages founded with a period of tax exemption. In Polish it was called wolnizna. So this was to encourage settlement. Many places in Poland named Wola began with such privilege or as such privileged colonies. Well, why would you encourage colonization or movement to new settlements? The lords and the landowners made it so to increase the value of their land and started new villages and cities. So in short, Zduńska Wola means in essence the privileged settlement of the stove makers. Privilege as in they were exempt from taxes for a few years. Finally, before finishing, I would like to shout out the Spanish community, especially Carrietrix, for support and encouraging words. So thank you for that. Gracias a la comunidad española por vuestro cariño y apoyo. Significa mucho para mí. I would also like to start a new part in my episodes, which would include a player of the, well, maybe not the month, a player of the episode, and a quote of an episode. So let's start from the latter one. The quote of this episode comes from Das T, and he says, "The best signalers are the ones you don't even notice are there." I really like this one. And as a player of the episode is a Polish user called Delfino. First off, I really like how he kindly handles the drivers. Recently, I had the pleasure interacting with him at Grodzisk Mazowiecki. Secondly, he recently pointed out in the Polish channels some cool things. So, for example, he was talking with someone about new players who signal and don't handle it well. His answer I liked the most was about veteran players suggesting that signalers train on less populated servers. As he pointed out, and with which I completely agree, yes, you can learn the technicalities of signaling in less populated servers, but concerning the priority of sending trains, you do not get any feedback there. Yes, you can learn how to set a correct blockade and directions and so on, but the bots will not complain. They will not give you feedback, what you did wrong and what you did good. So this is an excellent counter that perhaps we should be more helpful towards such players and not just send them to the experimental servers or less populated servers. So thanks for that, Delfino. You are my favorite community member of this episode. Cheers. And that is all for today. Thank you for joining me for this episode. Keep it rolling, be kind, and until the next episode. Bye bye.